The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive bowl made of white metal and glowing crystal. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds sat in curved rows that rose up toward the ceiling. The air hummed with different voices, speaking in languages that sounded like music, grinding stone, or electronic beeps. Danny Carter sat alone in the back corner, just like he had every day for 3 years. His simple black suit looked plain compared to the flowing robes and shining armor worn by the other representatives. His notebook and old-style pen seemed primitive next to the floating holographic displays and thought-reading devices used by the advanced species. Nobody looked at him. Nobody spoke to him unless they had to. The other representatives treated him like furniture that happened to be in the room at the front of the hall. Ambassador Zelthara of the Zephyrian Republic stood at the central podium. Her crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. When she spoke, her voice rang like wind chimes in a storm. "The mathematical models are clear," she said, gesturing to complex equations that appeared in the air above her. "The Devourer machines follow quantum probability patterns. We can predict their movements using advanced calculations." The Corvan delegate, General Vex Mar, stood up with a sound like grinding metal. His massive frame was covered in dark armor that had scars from 100 battles. His forearms crossed as he spoke in a voice like thunder. "Mathematics will not stop these machines," he growled. "Only the strength of Corvan warriors can destroy them. We have fought for 10,000 years. We know how to win wars." From the diplomatic section, the Luminary ambassador floated slightly above her seat. Lady Serenmuth had no solid body, just shifting light that sometimes looked like a woman made of stars. Her thoughts reached into the minds of everyone present. "Violence and numbers mean nothing," her mental voice whispered in their heads. "We must try to communicate with these devourers. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. All consciousness seeks understanding." Danny wrote notes in his simple notebook while the 3 major powers argued. The pen scratched against paper in a sound that seemed loud in the high-tech chamber. A few beings glanced at him with what might have been amusement or pity. For 6 hours, they debated. The Zephyrians wanted to build massive computers to calculate where the Devourers would strike next. The Corvan Empire demanded permission to move their war fleets to the threatened systems. The Luminari insisted on attempting telepathic contact with the machine intelligence. All 3 plans required huge amounts of resources. All 3 would take months to organize. All 3 ignored the fact that entire worlds were being consumed. While they talked, when the formal debate ended, Speaker Turvash called for new proposals. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of 1,000 years of leadership. "Does any representative wish to address the council?" Danny raised his hand. The hall fell silent. Not the respectful quiet that greeted important speakers, but the awkward silence that happened when someone unexpected tried to join a conversation. Speaker Turvash looked surprised. In 3 years, the human had never requested to speak during formal sessions. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Carter of Earth." Danny stood up. His legs felt weak as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. He had practiced this moment in his quarters. But the reality felt much harder. "Thank you, Speaker," he said. His voice sounded small in the vast chamber, even with the amplification system helping him. "I have a simple suggestion." He walked down to the speaking area, his footsteps echoing. In the silence, the notebook in his hands felt heavy. "The Devourers are moving through the outer systems," Danny said. "They attack without warning. We lose entire worlds because we don't know they're coming until it's too late." He opened his notebook and read. From his careful handwriting, "I propose we set up warning stations throughout the danger zone. Small, automated beacons that can send messages faster than the Devourers can travel. Staff them with volunteers from all our species working together. When the machines appear, the stations send warnings to nearby worlds." The plan was simple. almost primitive compared to the complex solutions offered by the major powers. It didn't require new technology or massive fleets or telepathic experiments. General Vexmar made a sound like metal scraping stone. "Human, you suggest we place our people in the path of certain death, to send messages we could send with machines." "The Devourers destroy machines first," Danny replied. "They might not see living beings as immediate threats. We could gather intelligence while warning others." Lady Sarenmuth's mental voice carried amusement. "Your species thinks so simply. This threat requires sophisticated solutions, not the basic strategies of a primitive world." Ambassador Zelthara's crystal body flickered with patterns that showed polite dismissal. "While we appreciate Earth's desire to contribute, this situation demands capabilities your people do not possess." Danny closed his notebook. "I understand. Thank you for listening." He walked back to his corner seat while the major powers returned to their complex debates. Within an hour, they had agreed on a joint approach that combined all three of their plans. It would take 4 months to implement and cost more resources than most species produced in a year. As the session ended, representatives filed out in groups organized by species and alliance. The Zephyrians clustered together, their crystal bodies chiming softly as they shared data. The Corvan delegation moved like a military unit, their heavy boots making the floor shake. The Luminari simply faded away, returning to whatever dimension they called home. Danny packed his notebook and pen into a simple bag. As he prepared to leave, he noticed that his small communication device was blinking with an incoming message. The message was encrypted with codes that no one in the council would recognize. He read it quickly, then deleted it. The message had been simple. "Package delivered. Volunteers in position. Begin Phase 2. Danny walked out of the council chamber. Alone, just as he had entered. Nobody watched him leave. Nobody saw him stop at a public communication terminal in the corridor outside. Nobody heard him send a brief message to an address that led to a ship already 3 days out from Earth. The message was even simpler than the one he had received. They said no. Proceed as planned. In the empty corridor, Danny Carter allowed himself a small smile. For 3 years he had sat in that corner, listening and learning and planning. For 3 years he had let them think humans were simple and weak and unimportant. Soon, they would learn how wrong they had been. But by then, it would be too late to stop what was already in motion. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's grand plan began. 3 months of building massive computers, moving war fleets, and attempting telepathic contact with the Devourer machines. 3 months of watching the threat grow worse. Emergency session alarm echoed through the council chambers at dawn. Representatives rushed to their seats, many still wearing sleeping clothes or battle gear. The usual order and ceremony was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. Speaker Turvash looked older than his 1,000 years. His ancient hands shook as he called the session to order. "The situation has changed," he announced. "We have lost contact with the Corvan Third Fleet." General Vexmar stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Impossible. The Third Fleet has 500 ships. They are the finest warriors in the galaxy. They vanished 2 days ago," the speaker continued. "No distress signals. No final communications. The last message simply said they had found the enemy." Ambassador Zelthara's crystal body flickered with rapid calculations. "The Zephyrian research stations in the Outer Rim have also gone silent. 7 facilities with our most advanced minds. They were studying the Devourer movement patterns when contact was lost." Lady Sarenmuth materialized in her seat, her light form dimmer than usual. When she spoke, her mental voice carried pain that made everyone in the chamber wince. "The Luminari colony of Bright Harbor is gone. 3 million of my people live there. In their final moments, they screamed into the mental network about machines that consumed not just their bodies, but their very thoughts and dreams. Danny Carter sat in his corner, writing in his notebook. He had been taking notes since the session began, but nobody paid attention to him. They were too busy being afraid. The reports continued for hours. The Devourer machines were not following any of the predicted patterns. They struck without warning, leaving no survivors, no evidence, no clues about their methods. The Joint Task Force had failed completely. "We need new plans," Speaker Torvash said. "The current approach is not working." General Vexmar slammed his fist on his desk. "Send more fleets, bigger weapons. We will overwhelm them with superior numbers." "Mathematics suggests a different approach," Ambassador Zelthara said. "We need more data, more time to study their patterns." Lady Sarenmuth's form flickered. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation. Move our people away from the threatened areas." The debate began again, but it felt different now. Before, the representatives had argued with confidence. Now they argued with desperation. Danny closed his notebook and stood up. The chamber fell quiet again. But this time the silence felt different. Less dismissive, more attentive. "Speaker, I request permission to address the council." "Granted, Ambassador Carter." Danny walked to the center of the chamber. This time, his steps were steady. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet confidence that made everyone listen. "You're all asking the wrong questions," he said. "You want to know how to stop the Devourers. But first, you need to understand what they really are." He opened his notebook and began reading from pages covered in small, neat handwriting. The attack on Corvin 3rd Fleet happened at 0347 Standard Time. The fleet was using Standard Battle Formation Theta 7, which puts the strongest ships at the front. The Devourers bypassed the front line and struck the command vessels first. They knew Corvin military doctrine. General Vexmar leaned forward. "How could you know these details?" "The fleet's tactical data was classified." Danny continued reading. "The Zephyrian research stations were attacked in order of their computational power, starting with the most advanced. The Devourers knew which stations were most important. They targeted the crystalline matrix cores that stored the research data." Ambassador Zelthara's body flashed with surprise. That information was not released to the public networks. "The Luminary colony was consumed from the inside out," Danny read. "The machines didn't just kill your people. They absorbed their telepathic abilities and used them to cause psychological damage that spread through your mental network. They turned your greatest strength into a weapon against you." Lady Sarenmuth's light form pulsed with shock. "How do you know about the network damage?" "We have not shared that information with anyone." Danny closed the notebook and looked around the chamber. Every representative was staring at him now. "I know because humans have been watching," he said. "For the past 4 months, we've had observation teams in every system the Devourers have attacked. While your people fled or died, humans stayed behind and recorded everything." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted questions and accusations. How had humans gotten past their security? Why hadn't they helped? How had they survived when advanced species had failed? Danny waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "The Devourers aren't random destroyers," he said. "They're learners. They study each species they encounter. They absorb your technologies, your tactics, your ways of thinking. Then they use that knowledge against the next target." He walked to the main display screen and activated a data pad. Images appeared showing Devourer machines in different configurations. These machines attacked the Corvin fleet using modified Corvin weapons. They breached Zephyrian research stations using Zephyrian computer codes. They destroyed the Luminary colony using captured telepathic abilities. The images were clear and detailed. They showed things that no one else had been able to record. "Your Joint Task Force failed because you were fighting an enemy that was constantly becoming stronger. Every battle taught them more about how to defeat you." Ambassador Zelthara's voice rang with disbelief. If humans possess this intelligence, why did you not share it? Billions of lives could have been saved. Danny's expression didn't change. We tried to share. 3 months ago, I stood in this chamber and offered to help. You dismissed our proposal as too simple. You said humans lack the capabilities to understand the threat. The chamber fell silent. Representatives looked at each other with growing unease. So we decided to understand the threat on our own, Danny continued. While you built computers and moved fleets and tried telepathic contact, we did something different. We studied the enemy by becoming prey. He activated another display. This one showed human observation posts hidden throughout the danger zone. Small, simple structures that looked like abandoned mining equipment or research stations. Humans have been living alongside the Devourers for months, Danny said. We learned their patterns, their methods, their weaknesses. We understand them because we think like them. General Vexmar's voice was barely controlled. You speak as if humans and these machines are similar. Danny looked directly at the Corvan general. We are similar. Both species are predators. Both learn from our prey. Both become stronger by consuming our enemies. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The representative stared at the quiet human who had sat in their corner. For 3 years, and for the first time, they saw something that frightened them. The difference, Danny said, is that we're better at it than they are. He gathered his materials and walked back to his corner seat. The session continued for another hour, but the tone had changed completely. The major powers were no longer debating how to implement their own plans. They were asking the human representative what he thought they should do. Danny Carter answered their questions with the same quiet confidence he had shown all day. But now, when he spoke, everyone listened. And in the back of their minds, a new question was forming. If humans had been this capable all along, what else had they been hiding? The news reached the Galactic Council at midnight. Corvan Prime, the ancient homeworld of the galaxy's greatest warriors, had fallen in 36 hours. Danny Carter stood at the observation deck of the Council station, watching refugee ships arrive from the destroyed system. Hundreds of vessels streamed past the windows, carrying the survivors of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Behind him, the emergency session had been going for 6 hours. The shouting had stopped an hour ago, replaced by the quiet desperation of beings who finally understood they were going to lose. General Vexmar sat slumped in his chair, his massive frame looking smaller than Danny had ever seen it. The proud warrior's 4 arms hung limp at his sides. His voice was barely a whisper. They came from everywhere at once, he said for the 10th time. The machines used our own defense satellites against us. They turned our planetary shields into weapons. They knew our military codes, our battle plans, our secret bunkers. Ambassador Zelthara's crystal body had lost its shine. Her calculations showed the same result no matter how many times she ran them. At current consumption rates, the Devourers will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Our combined fleets cannot slow their advance. Lady Saren Muth had barely spoken since the news arrived. The loss of so many minds at once had damaged the Luminari mental network. When she did communicate, her thoughts felt hollow and broken. Speaker. Turvash looked at the human representative. Ambassador Carter, does Earth have any new intelligence about these attacks? Danny turned away from the window. We do, but first, I need to tell you something that will be hard to accept. He walked to the center of the chamber and activated the main display. Images appeared showing the destroyed remains of Corvan Prime. The machines that attacked your homeworld were not the same ones that started this war, Danny said. These new Devourers incorporated Corvan technology, Zephyrian processing power, and Luminari mental abilities. They had become something much more dangerous. The display showed close-up images of the new machines. They looked like a nightmare fusion of all the galaxy's greatest achievements twisted into instruments of destruction. Each species they consume makes them stronger, Danny continued. They don't just destroy civilizations, they become them. General Vexmar raised his head. If you knew this would happen, why did you not warn us? Danny's expression remained calm. We did warn you, multiple times. 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Every time, you dismissed our concerns as the fears of a primitive species. He activated another section of the display. This one showed human colonies throughout their small territory. So we stopped asking for permission and started preparing for war. The images that appeared made the assembled representatives gasp. The human worlds they remembered as simple farming colonies and basic industrial centers had been transformed into something unrecognizable. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every human world. The structures looked organic and mechanical at the same time, like living metal that pulsed with dark energy. Strange ships moved between the platforms, their designs unlike anything in the galactic database. What have you done? Ambassador Zelthara whispered. Danny's voice remained steady. We prepared to fight an enemy that learns from its victims. To do that, we had to become something they couldn't learn from. The display showed human cities that had been rebuilt with architecture that seemed to bend space around itself. Factories that produced materials that shouldn't exist according to known physics. Training centers where humans practiced with weapons that made the watching aliens step back in fear. Our entire species volunteered for military enhancement, Danny said. Genetic modifications to improve our reflexes and strength. Cybernetic implants to interface directly with our weapons. Neural conditioning to resist the mental attacks that destroyed the Luminary colonies. Lady Sarenmuth's mental voice carried horror. The changes we sense in your mind. What have you become? Danny touched a spot behind his ear where metal interfaces showed beneath his skin. We became what we needed to be to win. The display changed again, showing the human fleet that had emerged from Earth's solar system. The ships were massive, dark things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved through space in formations that hurt to look at directly. These vessels violate at least 12 Council treaties, Ambassador Zelthara said. Artificial intelligence restrictions, self-replicating weapon bans, dimensional warfare prohibitions. You made those laws to prevent anyone from creating weapons like the Devourers, Danny replied. We broke those laws to create weapons that could destroy them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not just prepared for war. They had transformed themselves into something that might be worse than the enemy they were fighting. Where is this fleet now? Speaker Turvash asked. Danny smiled for the first time since the session began. It was not a pleasant expression. Engaging. The Devourers in the Outer Rim systems. We've been fighting them for 2 weeks. The display showed battle footage that had been recorded by human ships. The images were disturbing to watch. Human vessels fought the Devourer machines with tactics that seemed as much psychological warfare as physical combat. The human ships didn't just attack, they hunted. They set traps, used deception, and employed strategies that turned the Devourers' learning abilities against them. When the machines tried to adapt to human tactics, the humans had already moved on to completely different approaches. Most disturbing of all, the human crews seemed to enjoy the combat. Their communications were full of laughter and excitement that chilled the watching representatives. You're winning, General Vexmar said with disbelief. We're not just winning, Danny replied. We're learning from them, just as they learned from you. Every battle makes us stronger. The display showed the aftermath of recent human victories. Captured Devourer technology was being absorbed into human ships. Prisoners were being studied in facilities that looked more like torture chambers than research labs. The difference between us and the Devourers, Danny said, is that we don't just consume our enemies, we understand them, we become them. And then we become something better. Ambassador Zelthora's voice shook. You speak as if you've done this before. Danny looked directly at her. Earth's history is written in the bones of species that thought they were stronger than humans. We learned a long time ago that the key to survival isn't being the biggest or the smartest or the most advanced. It's being the most adaptable, the most ruthless, the most willing to do whatever it takes to win. The chamber was completely quiet. Now, the representatives stared at the human who had sat silently in their corner for 3 years, and finally understood what they had been ignoring. The devourer threat will be eliminated within 6 months, Danny continued. Our projections show complete victory with minimal human losses. Speaker Torvash found his voice. And after the devourers are gone, what then? Danny gathered his materials and prepared to leave. Then we'll have some very serious discussions about the future of galactic civilization. As he walked toward the exit, every representative in the chamber watched him go. They finally understood that they hadn't been saved by their protectors. They had been conquered by their saviors, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. 18 months after the first Devourer attack, the war was over. The galaxy was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It was the silence of a broken thing trying to heal. The final Galactic Council session was held aboard the human ship Retribution. The vessel hung in space like a dark metal mountain, its hull covered in scars from battles that had remade the galaxy. Strange lights pulsed beneath its surface, and the very air around it seemed to bend in ways that hurt to look at. Danny Carter no longer sat in a corner. He stood at the center of the chamber, behind a podium that had been built from the wreckage of a Devourer command ship. The metal still hummed with energy that made the few remaining representatives nervous. The chamber itself was much smaller than the old council hall. There were only 37 seats now, representing the survivors of species that had once numbered in the hundreds. The Zephyrians had 3 delegates left from their billions. The Kovan Empire had been reduced to a dozen refugee worlds. The Luminari existed as scattered individuals, their great mental network broken forever. Danny looked different too. The cybernetic implants behind his ears glowed with soft blue light. His eyes reflected displays that only he could see. When he moved, there was a precision to his gestures that suggested he was no longer entirely human. The Devourer threat has been eliminated, he announced to the small gathering. The last machine intelligence was destroyed 4 days ago in the outer rim. The galaxy is safe. Scattered applause came from the survivors, but it sounded hollow in the large chamber. Safety had come at a price none of them had expected to pay. General Vexmar, one of only 12 Corvan officers to survive the war, stood up slowly. His armor was scarred and patched, a shadow of its former glory. Ambassador Carter, he said. His voice tired. We must discuss the future. Our species need worlds to rebuild on, resources to survive, protection from other threats. Danny nodded. Of course, that's why we're here. He activated the chamber's display system. A map of the galaxy appeared, showing the current state of affairs. Vast red zones mark areas that had been consumed by the Devourers. Yellow sections showed damaged systems where survivors still struggled to rebuild. Green areas indicated worlds that were safe and productive. Almost all the green zones were in human-controlled space. The new galactic order will be simple, Danny said. Humanity will provide protection and resources to surviving species. In return, those species will contribute to the common defense according to their capabilities. Ambassador Zelthara, her crystal body dim and cracked, spoke up. What you describe sounds like submission rather than cooperation. Danny's expression remained neutral. The war taught us that cooperation requires leadership. For too long, this galaxy was ruled by committees and debates. While you argued about the best course of action, entire worlds died. He gestured to the display, which showed the timeline of the Devourer War. We tried to work within your system. We offered help, shared intelligence, proposed solutions. You dismissed us as primitive and irrelevant. The display showed the meetings where human proposals had been rejected, the warnings that had been ignored, the offers of assistance that had been turned down. So we developed our own solutions, Danny continued. While you debated, we acted. While you planned, we prepared. While you died, we survived. Lady Sarenmuth, her light form barely visible, sent a weak mental message to the chamber. You could have saved us. You have the knowledge and power to prevent the destruction of our worlds. Instead, you watched us fall. Danny looked directly at her. Yes, we could have intervened earlier. We could have shared our technology and prevented billions of deaths. The admission sent a shock through the chamber. The survivors had suspected this truth, but hearing it confirmed was different. Why didn't you? General Vexmar demanded. Danny's answer was simple and terrible. Because this galaxy needed to learn the same lesson we learned on Earth long ago. Only the strong survive. Only the adaptable thrive. Only the ruthless inherit the future. He walked around the podium, his footsteps echoing in the quiet chamber. For thousands of years, your species ruled through accidents of evolution. The Zephyrians were intelligent, so they controlled science. The Coven were strong, so they controlled military might. The Luminari were telepathic, so they controlled diplomacy. The display showed the old galaxy with its complex web of alliances and power structures, but none of you were tested. None of you faced real extinction. You grew soft, comfortable, predictable. When a true threat appeared, you couldn't adapt quickly enough to survive. Danny stopped in front of the Corvan general. Your warriors were brave, but they fought the same way for 10,000 years. When the enemy learned your tactics, you had no others. He turned to the Zephyrian ambassador. Your calculations were perfect, but they were based on assumptions about rational behavior. When faced with an irrational enemy, your mathematics failed. He looked at the Luminari representative. Your telepathy was powerful, but it became a weakness when the enemy learned to use it against you. Danny returned to the podium. Humanity survived because we never stopped learning. Our history is full of species that thought they were our superiors, predators that hunted us, diseases that tried to kill us, environments that tried to destroy us. We adapted to all of them. The display showed scenes from Earth's history. Humans surviving ice ages, taming fire, domesticating animals, building civilizations, conquering their own planet. We learned that survival requires sacrifice. Sometimes you have to become the monster to defeat the monster. Sometimes you have to watch your enemies fall to understand how to avoid falling yourself. General Vexmar's voice was barely controlled. You used us as lessons. Our people died to teach you how to fight the Devourers. Yes, Danny said without hesitation. And because of those lessons, humanity survived. The galaxy survived. The alternative was extinction for everyone. The chamber fell silent. The survivors looked at each other, understanding finally settling in. They had not been saved by heroes. They had been preserved by predators who had decided they were worth keeping alive. What happens now? Ambassador Zelthara, S.Danny, activated a new display showing reconstruction plans. Human ships were already moving supplies to damaged worlds. Human engineers were rebuilding destroyed cities. Human scientists were developing new technologies to help the survivors. Now we rebuild, Danny said, under human leadership. With human protection, following human rules. He looked around the chamber at the representatives of broken civilizations. You have a choice. Accept the new order and help us build a stronger galaxy, or reject it and try to survive on your own. The choice was not really a choice at all. The survivors had no fleets, no resources, no power to resist. They could accept human dominance or face extinction. One by one, the representatives agreed to the new arrangement. They signed treaties that made their species junior partners in a human-led galaxy. They accepted terms that would have been unthinkable before the war. As the session ended, Danny Carter stood alone in the chamber. The survivors filed out to carry news of the new order to their scattered peoples. The galaxy would recover, but it would never be the same. In the end, everyone had learned the same lesson. The quiet ones, the ignored ones, the dismissed ones were often the most dangerous. They were the ones who watched and learned and planned, while others talked and argued and failed. The galaxy had not been saved by its strongest species. It had been inherited by its smartest predators. And now, finally, everyone understood that there was a difference between the two. The age of committees and debates was over. The age of human leadership had begun, and it was far too late for anyone to stop it.